people need to be heard.
With interviews that matter.
Trust your number one talk station to have you covered.
99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Above and beyond borders.
Beyond borders.
It's Borderline
with Ireti Bakare-Yusuf.
Welcome back to Borderlines. Oh, that was a most emotional interview. Exclusives that we got on there that we totally didn't expect. Who knew that doctors in Gaza were also treating IDF soldiers? Who knew that? That's why you must always stay in touch. Stay tuned to Borderlines every Friday, starting from 4 o'clock. But right now, my next, this is going to be an interesting one because we're kind of traveling to the place of chaos, that being Donald Trump's next 4 years. Andrew, I've watched him on TV many times. He's one of those big brains. He knows a lot about economists. He's a strategist. He's a global citizen with a diverse career spanning academia, consulting, and public service. Andrew Nevin, Dr. Andrew Nevin to you, leads the Brainomics. Now, I'm going to have to ask him what that is and find out if I actually belong, if I can apply to belong. The Brainomics venture at the Center for Brain Health and UT in Dallas, Texas, America, a multidisciplinary effort to unlock vast human potential by examining the economic impact of interventions to improve brain health and performance. Andrew, I've got to ask you, where do I send my application? I need to know if I belong in this institution of yours. Oh.
Well, everyone belongs. I mean, everyone can they make their brain work better, and the better you work the brain, the better your life will be, and the better the economy will be for you personally, for all of us. But I mean, when you were growing up in your life, has anyone ever taught you how your brain works?
No. How does it work? Well, I know you have brain food.
Well,
I know you learn, and then it absorbs.
All right, so you know some things. So I'll give one tip to the group today, and where I work is the Center for Brain Health, so it's a neuroscience center. It starts with the brain, starts with the science. And there's one simple truth: the brain actually can't multitask.
Oh, it can't?
So if you want to be more productive, do one. No, it can't. Just do one task at a time.
Wow. Are you trying to say...
Complete that task, then switch to the next task. If you interrupt, you're just going to be more efficient. So you have a task, you get pinged by a message, you attend to the message, your brain has to switch to the message, that takes a neural load. Then they have to switch back to what you were doing before, and it's inefficient. So nothing else you learned today listening to us, don't multitask.
Okay. So you've heard it. Lagos, Nigeria, Brazil.
And of course, Nigerians are among...
Go on.
But also, Nigerians are among the worst multitaskers because they have multiple phones and they're attending to them all. If you're in a meeting, turn your phone over, don't attend to the messages. Focus on what you're doing, and you'll be more efficient. Your life will be more productive.
Absolutely. Well,
and your brain will be healthier, will last longer. So
you heard it first here. Another exclusive. Stop multitasking. But Andrew, unfortunately, we seem to have this delay, so it's not like I'm trying to interrupt you. I got it quiet, and then I think you finish. But for some reason, there's a huge voice delay in our conversation, but we will make the best of it. But before I move on to what we really want to talk about, it sounds to me like you're saying the brain is a male what do you call it, is a male part of the body, because we know that women can multitask because we've been doing it forever.
Well, I think even women will be even more productive if they, in fact, if we examine women's multitasking, I'm pretty sure we'll actually find out they complete one task before they go to another task. So they multitask in the sense they're doing sequential tasks, but they're not doing 2 or 3 tasks at the same time.
How fascinating. I'll have to have you back to discuss this.
But
in
also
more detail.
lots of women have, women also have a lot of burnout, a lot of stress. And one of the, if you're trying to multitask all the time, it's going to affect your brain.
Yes, that's very, very true. So,
but the next session we can discuss not just multitasking, we can discuss many things about the brain.
Well, no, I absolutely will ask my producer to book you so we can literally just talk about that, because I think it's absolutely fascinating, and it's not something most people think about. Like you said, in Nigeria, in Lagos, we consume chaos almost like we need to exist on it, but really we don't. So let's talk about Mr. Chaos himself, Trump 2.0. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, there's so much to unpack here. I mean, let's just start with the fact that when Trump was elected in 2016 and started in 2017, he was surprised, I think, that he won the election. So he wasn't really prepared to take over. So this time around, it's quite a bit different, because there's been not just President Trump, but thousands of people who support him who've been preparing for this day to take over again. So then you see what we have now, which is these incredible number of executive orders that come out on day one, and in many ways these executive orders are exactly what he said he would do. I mean, if we start, for example, with the border security, I mean, I don't think it's an overstatement to say he won this election primarily on the issue of border security. So now he's gone to implement it. He's effectively closed the border. He's stopped any refugee applications. He started already looking for illegal migrants or undocumented migrants in the United States, preparing to deport them. I mean, similarly on the tariff issue, I mean, it was your reporter just said he may back off on China, but I'm sitting here as a Canadian. We're facing 25% tariffs. Mexico, 25% tariffs. And that's what he promised on that. So, and then of course at a more global level, I mean, he has been very clear he wants to change the world order. Now, I'm one of those people who feel like the United States has benefited from being the leader in the world. But, he's made the narrative that this has actually cost the United States economically. So he's unpicking that. He's left the WHO. We'll see what happens with the United Nations. But it's also quite interesting to put that together with his attempts to take over Greenland, to take over Panama. And of course, he's actually said that he's going to try to annex Canada, which is something that's astonishing to me as a Canadian.
So
I don't think anyone should be surprised. He's doing exactly what he said he would do.
He's doing what it says on the packet. Let's talk about immigration first, because I'm one of those people. I keep saying to people, it's the irony of a country built on immigration, built by immigrants, becoming afraid of immigrants. Now, we must separate irregular, what we no longer call, and you can call me a libertarian if you like, I don't know, what we no longer call illegal immigration. We call it irregular immigration, with actual immigrants, those who come to America, to come and find a new life and discover the American dream and get their slice of the pie. How does America get the right to say enough? How? when the people saying enough were actually stole somebody else's land.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, of course, all colonial countries. I mean, the ones that the Europeans took over. So Canada, Australia, the United States. We and I count myself among that group. We stole the countries from the people that lived there. And of course, one of the major reasons we were able to do that was because of disease, particularly smallpox. But President Trump has been very clear. The United States continues to welcome immigrants. But the narrative that he's been putting out and his people have been putting out is there's 14 million undocumented immigrants. And, it brings all sorts of problems to the United States. And then at least that's what he says. But when you combine it with the fact that lower middle class incomes have declined over 50 years, it's easy to create this narrative that said that the reason these incomes have declined is because of this illegal immigration or the irregular immigration, not the regular immigration.
Yeah.
And that's the narrative that's being played out in the United States. Now, of course, just at a factual level, the crime issue is a little bit of a sideshow, I would call it, because immigrants, on average, whether they're documented or not documented, commit less crimes. Obviously, because they're trying to stay, below the radar of law enforcement. But we have some high-profile cases that have allowed that narrative to be said that they also bring crime. But the other issue that's really critical in the United States is we really do have this illicit drug fentanyl crisis. And it's not just a question of people in poor urban areas or rich people taking cocaine. And what's happened with fentanyl is you have, first originally with opioids, but now with fentanyl, you have tens of thousands of deaths of people all over America, rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. And, that's part of the reaction. In fact, the reason he's saying no tariffs on China, but he's going to put 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico is largely because of this fentanyl issue.
Well, we could talk about Trump. There's so many. The name is so multi-layered, should I say. He happens to be married to an immigrant himself.
Well, I think let me point.
Go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am one of those people, of course, who, if I was American, I wouldn't have voted for Trump. But I understand many of the things he's saying, and it's very interesting. If we go back to the 90s, there was something from the IMF, the World Bank, and the world called the Washington Consensus. And it talked about free movement of people, free movement of capital, free movement of goods. So that Washington Consensus was kind of the idea of this globalization. And, I actually, in the 2000s, was critical of globalization. To be really honest with your listeners, the people that benefit from globalization are people like me. I get to live in Africa, I get to live in Asia, I get to live in Europe, I get to live, I fly around all the time, you show up at conferences, we have all the people at the WEF, all the people participating in globalization are having a great time. But, that's only 5% of the population. As I said, you've had lower middle class incomes decline over 50 years from the United States. And you had both the Democrats and the Republicans supporting the Washington Consensus, telling people you were going to be better off as a result of this. And people have watched their economic situation decline in many cases, plus the fentanyl crisis. So I am not surprised at all at the election result. And someone's come along and said he doesn't use the term Washington consensus, but he has basically said we are no longer bound to the Washington consensus. You make things in the United States, you serve Americans first. We're no longer internationalists.
So is it then correct to say Trump's MAGA, because one could argue that every single American president, as far back as time can remember, is actually about America first. So let's call this Trump's MAGA. Is Trump's MAGA a reject? Is it a revolt against globalization? Because you're right, there was globalization, and like I said, I'm a libertarian. I believe in open borders. I believe, if you open your borders and actually interview those who are good, not necessarily for criminals, if you like, then the world would be a much better place. But perhaps I'm too much of an idealist. So does this thing come from a place of fear, which Trump is feeding into in America? Because, like you said, it's the educated who actually benefit from globalization. It's the upper middle class, it's the academics, etc., who benefit from globalization. In fact, it's the West who benefited from globalization. And now you have this section in the West who are saying, well, I'm American, I've got an American passport, I don't get any of the benefits of all these fancy things that you're all talking about because it's over my head.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in Canada, and my father worked for the Firestone Corporation, which at the time I think was the seventh largest corporation in the world. And they had all sorts of factories around the United States, in Ohio, in Michigan, South Carolina. And the workers in these factories were very prosperous. They were upper middle class people essentially at the time. But, this decline is real. You go to a place like Youngstown, Ohio, which used to be a very wealthy steel town, and now it's effectively like a ghost town. So all these people have been left behind by globalization. And of course, the educated up until now, with the way media's gone, controlled the media, the mainstream media. So they tell a happy tale of globalization because they're also beneficiaries of it. I mean, if you watch CNN, you have all these wonderful reporters, very smart people. They get to go to war zones, really interesting places, flying all over the world. No wonder they're in favor of globalization. But, I am very sympathetic to the view that we forgot a lot of people behind with globalization. And if you go back to China, so I went to China the first time in 1983. And when I went to China the first time, there was not a single private car in China. Now, of course, it's the largest producer and consumer of cars. Now, in the 90s, and of course, many of your listeners are obviously won't remember this, but what happened was this issue around declining lower middle class and middle class incomes was really becoming apparent. So one of the things that President Clinton did was open up for this imports from China. So you had cheap manufactured goods coming from China to compensate for the lower incomes. But, the net result over decades of that is, of course, to create an economic rival, economic powerhouse. And Trump is the first person that says, really, do we want to have a situation where what Americans consume are produced in China and we're dependent on China and we don't get the jobs? Now, whether or not his economic prescription works remains open, but I understand the logic that's going through the Trump administration. Absolutely.
And which brings us right down to Africa, which is the center of our conversation. So we had Biden, who just left, Joe Biden. His policies, he had programs like Prosper Africa, which was about boosting trade, economic growth, focus on infrastructure, clean energy, technology, etc. And he also encouraged African countries to diversify. Now we've got Trump, who is more of a centralist, is about looking domestic, growing their own country. First and foremost, do you think did Africa really get any benefit from Biden's Prosper African policy?
No, I mean, I'm very much in the camp that said, no one in the world really cares about Africa. I mean, the only people that are going to make Africans prosperous are Africans. I mean, obviously, when I lived in Nigeria, I had many friends who worked for these multilateral aid organizations. And you see the headlines, Nigeria gets $3 or $5 billion in multilateral aid. But, that's a very small number compared to the diaspora remittances. And the number is not real. I mean, as I said, I had all these friends. They had the expensive apartment. They had the driver. When the car was imported from the United Kingdom or the United States. I mean, the amounts paid to the Nigerian staff was a pittance. So if there's $3 billion of aid, in theory, if $1 billion actually came into the country of Nigeria, I'd be surprised. So let's not kid ourselves. And as I said, I don't think anyone really cares. But I don't think that matters very much because I think, Africans are perfectly capable of sorting out, what's needed for Africa. I mean, the one thing that is clear, though, I mean, we know that 40% of young people now come from Africa over the next few decades. So the world actually needs Africa more than Africa needs the world, and particularly the kind of the care industries, the health industries. I mean, the only people that are going to be able to do this work are Africans. But the other aspect of it is, I said consistently when I was in the country, AFCFTA, fantastic step forward, but it would take a very long time to materialize. And the African Union, I mean, this was part of their 60-year strategy, 50-year strategy, 2063, vision. And so, I think we need to continue to make steps on AFCFTA. Africans need to trade with Africans, but let's not have any illusion that programs coming out of the United States or Europe are here to really work Africans. I mean, I remember being one of the last events I did in Lagos, was the announcement by the European Union of $1 billion fund for agriculture in Nigeria. I'm not sure we've seen a single euro or a single kobo of that actually invested.
Yeah. Now, you said something earlier. You said you can understand where Trump is coming from. Of course. I don't know whether you were at Davos, but Davos just finished, today?
I was invited once. I didn't go. I've never gone to Davos. I'm actually not. The idea to me of the billionaire class getting together to kind of tell the rest of the world what to do is is not something that I think is helpful for the world. And I think maybe WEF was interesting 30 years ago, but it's really a liability for where we need to go.
Well, I read that it's $40,000 per delegate. I'm still in shock. I imagine if all that money was actually given. If all that money was actually invested in fixing the problems of the world, wouldn't it? Would be in a much better place. But anyway, let me get off my soapbox and get back to my job. So you said something earlier, you know, about understanding where Trump is coming from, and there's a part of what he says, which I think is what the things that he said. That's basically, for want of a description, common sense, right? One of the things he said at Davos, in his Zoom speech, was he said, "Look, come and build your manufacturing plants, make your stuff in America, and I'll give you tax breaks, right? Because I don't want you making it elsewhere. If you make it elsewhere and come and sell it in America, you'll get tariffs. But if you come and make it here, I'll give you tax breaks." Well, we know how capitalism works. Capitalism wants more money, and money is never enough for capitalism. So why aren't African countries saying the same? Why didn't an African country, any African country, get up at that point and say, you know what, thank you, President Trump. By the way, Africa's ready to do the same thing. In fact, we will double match his tax and give you near zero taxes for 5 years. If you come to Africa, we'll even give you infrastructure. We'll help you. Why are we not saying that? Why are we constantly sort of, I don't know, echoing things that don't benefit us?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I've been very clear in the last few years I was in Nigeria that, I mean, I think a better path and worrying so much about manufacturing is actually to focus on the export of services. And I think that is, that's the Vice President, His Excellency the Vice President's strategy. And I think it's working on there. And, the reason I put forward was it's just difficult to put together the infrastructure for manufacturing in the next kind of 5 to 7 years. I mean, I think it should be a long-term goal. But also the services are also higher value-added jobs. People in coding, accounting, legal. So I still think that that's the path for Nigeria. His Excellency the Vice President's actually set up a center now in Gombe that's exporting services to the rest of the world, high value services. And it just shows you, because one of the arguments I made at the time as well was something that could happen across the country in Nigeria. So in Gombe, in Enugu, at Aguri, there's people talking about putting out center on there. So I continue to think that's the best strategy.
Whilst,
but in terms of kind of an overall tariff strategy, sorry, let me just finish. I do think that it should be done at the Africa level, because the big advantage the United States has is 23% of the world's economy. It doesn't actually need anything else from anyone. It can be a self-sufficient economy. There's a few minerals that it's lacking, rare earths. It's outsourced its chip manufacturing to Taiwan, so it would need to bring that. But everything else the United States can actually do itself. But an individual African country is a little bit subscale, so I think there would be the benefit of the AFCFTA cooperating within Africa. And of course, if Africa started to grow a little bit faster and cooperated within Africa, and AFCFTA succeeded, I mean, we would be the economic powerhouse of the world.
Indeed, but I have to come back to you at what you said about how hard it will be to create the infrastructure. Well, I grew up in England, and I remember industrial towns coming up during Margaret Thatcher's time. Why can't we create industrial complexes, right? Because we're not necessarily talking about infrastructure. Yes, I understand, getting strong infrastructure across the whole of Nigeria is going to need quite a lot of time, but a lot of years. But however, why can't we build these small industrial complexes that are powered by solar and those things? It doesn't, in my modern head, it doesn't connect that we can't. And whilst you're right that we should export services, why we have so many raw materials in Nigeria, why can't we make and then send out?
Yeah, I know, it's absolutely, but we both know the answer to that. We still kind of have some governance challenges on that, and particularly this kind of if you put together high capital expenditure, even if you put it together all in one place and you've got the power and the infrastructure and the services and like a free zone, it still is it's still open for kind of expropriation by the state apparatus and other issues that we know. I mean, the thing about the services is much more distributed. It's very hard for it's very difficult for the centralized state to extract from the service economy versus the manufacturing economy. Until people have more confidence that if they make a large-scale capital investment, it will be safe, they're not going to make that. And, we take the example, Mr. Dangote, to his credit, put $20 billion into his refinery in Lagos. But you have Mr. Dangote, who's Africa's richest man, and the government disagreeing on the flow of oil and where the refinery gets the oil. And then if you're sitting there as a business person outside of Africa and you look, Mr. Dangote has these challenges. How is it possible, for me to come in? Why would I invest $100 million building this free zone? Because if Mr. Dangote can't do it, I'm not going to do it as an outsider to it. So that remains an issue. And of course, I've got my very good friend, Vice Chancellor Kingsley Mahala, who's the startup Vice Chancellor in the African University of Governance, I think it's called, based in Rwanda, to address specifically this issue.
Well, I still think it's something that we need to
So as we get better governance, we'll get higher capital investment. Yeah, I understand, but I'm saying, that's my view on why we still have the barriers to it.
Yes, I agree.
So while we still have those barriers, we've got to grow the service economy, which is grown in a more distributed way.
Would you have a word with Shatima, our vice president? Perhaps he could start thinking of how to actually create industrial complexes, since his job is really the economy as vice president. We're asking you to have a word with him.
Well, I had my one word with him on the service economy, and he's made a lot of progress. So I'm happy with that. Someone else has to pick up and say, now let's add manufacturing to that, or more, the infrastructure, capital intensive industries.
Indeed. Right. So let's again going back to Trump and Africa. Okay, I'm being told to remind 0201277093, 0201465719, 08095975 is the WhatsApp message. I have not opened the lines. I will be opening soon. My guest is Dr. Andrew Nevin. As you can see, is he was a Nigerian for a few years, and I'll ask him how long. So he was far away from home. He's a Canadian Nigerian, I think, but I'll let him tell us that later on, because we've still got a bit to cover. Trump has talked a lot about security, but he's only talking about Ukraine and Russia. Not said a word about security in Africa. Not a single. I don't even know if he knows that we're having security issues in Africa. I don't know if he knows about what's going on in South Sudan, what's going on in the Congo, heck, what's going on in the north in Nigeria. Does he care, and should he care? And should we just focus on our own problems and try to figure it out?
Well, I think it's fair to say he doesn't know. I think it's probably fair to say, speculate a little bit, he doesn't care. I mean, I think if you take the South Sudan conflict, for example, I have to confess, as a Westerner, it's very difficult for me to really understand what's going on and the players and the history on that. And then it's just kind of disappeared from the consciousness in the West. So I don't think there's going to be any global assistance in kind of addressing these conflicts, just to be very frank about it.
Yeah. So
only Africans can solve the security issues in Africa.
We're on our own, as they say. So
but I mean, people.
No, I appreciate your honesty.
I'm incredibly optimistic.
I appreciate your honesty
on that, and I'm perfect. Nigerians are perfectly capable of solving their own problems. And it's my dear friend Ajuri, who's I guess presidential spokesman for the now. I mean, he says Nigerians are capable of excelling in every single field of human activity. And I tell you, it's very interesting for me in the United States, because as I'm a big sports fan. Basketball, football, American football. I mean, the Nigerians are coming to dominate on that. And, I love watching Bam Adebayo. Giannis Antetokounmpo. I've talked about a lot on that. Every time the Bucks are on TV, I go watch the Bucks. The NFL, there's more and more people of Nigerian descent in the NFL. Obviously, football, English football, they're there. And the Nigerians I know in Dallas are very talented professionals in every field. So, I don't think the world should be worried about it. Well, I think the world should be worried about Nigeria, because I'm afraid of Nigeria.
Why?
I mean, the talent level is so, people are so smart. You look at people who are so smart, so athletic. I mean, I once went to play in London, top-end play at the National Theatre. It was Antony and Cleopatra by Shakespeare. So you have a 450-year-old play by English's greatest playwright. About a story in Egypt about 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. Of the top 7 actors in the play, 4 were of Nigerian descent.
Yeah, I get it.
And that just, see every activity. I mean, the song that's playing on the radio all the time is Shabuzi. So Shabuzi song. So here you have a Nigerian American who has the dominant country music song of 2000, not just country music, crossover song
Yeah.
of 2024. It is on all the time. What an amazing thing to think that. So, we know the music. We know Burna Boy, Fireboy, Tina Savage. So as the jury says, every activity of human beings, the Nigerians can dominate.
Indeed.
So I have I have incredible confidence in my lifetime we're going to see not just Nigeria do well, but this global Nigeria. I mean, the power of the diaspora. We wrote the paper on it, right? We mainly wrote it from an economic viewpoint. But as I said, all these other activities that Nigerians are making inroads in, it's incredible.
Indeed. In fact, one of the... I've forgotten his name now. He was being interviewed at Davos this morning. He talked about the soft infrastructure that Africa has, and you've already mentioned it. The people, the number of young people, and there's something going on with my screen that's actually distracting me. The number of young people and anyway, right. Thank you. Something was going on with my screen that's totally distracting me.
You can't multitask. That something happens with your screen and you're distracted from what you're thinking about on that. There we go. There we have the proof in real time, right?
They were probably trying to prove you right, actually. Now I get it. The lines are going. Before I pick up the lines, though, yes, I was talking about the soft infrastructure power that Nigeria is said to have had. I think it was one of the fintech people that was at Davos that was being interviewed, and I think you've mentioned some of it. And of course, like you rightly said, I think there's 4 unicorns in Nigeria. 4 of the unicorns, or is it 3 of the unicorns in the world are Nigerians. So what we need more is investment. Do you think that investment into Nigerian ideas and, birthing of new SMEs, etc. Do you think we will get more from the international community, especially as we're in a straight talk Trump era, 4 years, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I think we will get investment into high-tech businesses and this export of services, things that are low capital intensity. So if in my little world, I'm an angel for a few companies. I've stopped doing new angel investments because I've retired. But, one of them is crowdsourcing the next round of funding in the United States. One of them is talking to VCs in the United States, or 2 of them are. And people are interested in, as I said, so I think there's capital available for those companies that don't need a lot of capital, but need some to grow as a high tech or in the service sector. As I said, I do think that the confidence in the high investment, the $100 million, the $1 billion, the $10 billion, like Mr. Dangote, or $20 billion in his case, I think that's still very challenging. I think outside capital still looks at Nigeria and say, prove to us that this is a safe home for those sorts of capital investments.
That's a good.
Just to be very candid about it, as I said, I've got a few new angel investments in these high-tech type of companies, but I would never consider making it. I wouldn't invest in a mine in Nigeria.
Wow, very honest.
Because I'm still nervous about the safety of capital.
Indeed. Right, the lines are going. I'm going to pick up your calls now. Andrew, do you have a pen there? Because I'm going to try and do 2 or 3. So I'll give you time to answer them both all together. Coming to your calls now. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead. What's your name and where you're calling from, please?
Yeah, Titi Lokwe here.
Titi Lokwe, very quickly.
My first question is...
Only one. You only get one, please.
Oh, my God.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I don't know how I'm going to say it, but because they are interrelated somehow. But let me just try and manage my time very well. I am 100% in support of what Donald Trump is doing concerning globalization. Globalization, everything the world is doing is hypocrisy and big fraud. And I'll give you an example. The issue of climate change. Look at the last COP29 in Azerbaijan. The greatest polluters of this world, who are supposed to be responsible by making some money available for the cleaning up of other areas they have initially polluted, What commitment did they do? Nothing. And when Donald Trump comes up, I'm going to flow my oil, I'm going to do this, do that, give my people job opportunities. Then you want to tell me in Nigeria not to use my oil. How can Nigeria be talking about clean energy when you have a whole lot of good oil in Nigeria?
I need you to hurry up. I need you to hurry up, please.
To develop Nigeria. So the globalization you're talking about, you don't tell me how I can do business with anybody all over the world, but don't tell me how I negotiate my transaction. And that is it. Then the other one I wanted to say is that I want to ask him, why did he think Nigeria failed from the industrialized Nigeria that we had in the 1970s and downwards 80s?
Okay, I got it.
Nigeria is going down.
Titilope, I've got it. Right, you've got one question I'm going to answer and I'm going to pick up another call. Hello? Hello? Hello, I need you to speak up, please. Hello?
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. What's your name, where you calling from, and your question, please?
This is Chris.
Go ahead, Chris. Okay.
My question, is it true that Nigeria is a sovereign country that they can't ask for help in terms of security? Because somebody said that 2014, that Nigeria is a sovereign nation. They don't need to ask for help. And you ask him, how come? He should advise, he should talk to our vice president. And you yourself were laughing. Vice President Shetima says he's going to be in charge of security. And you heard what the man said about...
Yes, so what is your point, please? We are not having a discussion.
Question, is it true that Nigeria is a sovereign nation, that we don't need help?
Okay, thank you. Right, write that down, Andrew, and I'll pick up a third one. Hello?
Yeah, Ireti, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen from the United States.
He's from Canada.
Oh,
Dr.
from Canada.
Andrew Nevin, yes.
Okay. From Canada. This is Kenny. I'll be right quick. He's pointed out that Nigerians can really do a lot of things, and we're very talented people. So I would toe that line and say, yes, Nigerians, we really don't need help fixing our country, but we need help from the global people from one standpoint. I'm wanting them to make it clear to the political class at every opportunity they get that they are the ones that get information straight, directly about the things that they do in Nigeria, that they know how corrupt they are. And
I need you to wrap up quickly. The lines are alive.
Yes, what I'm saying in essence is that we need them to call out our leaders as often as they can.
Okay.
Because our leaders have given us an indirect gag order, and we're tired of it.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, I can only give you 2 minutes on that, please. The lines are going and I don't have much time left at all.
Well, let me just make a comment. I mean, I think the first gentleman's comment about climate change is exactly right. I mean, all of the issues around climate change, the climate catastrophe, have been caused by rich nations over the last century, essentially. And they are not the ones bearing the brunt. And all of these promises, all these promises of investment to mitigate climate change are just a mirage. So I was one of the founding governors of the Center for Financial Sustainability in Lagos. It was really led by FMDQ to put it together, and did that for a 5-year term. And every year I was thinking there would be this promised investment would come, and it never came. And I think this is a horrible injustice around the world. And it's, of course, not just Nigeria, it's not just Africa, it's also the low-lying islands, for example, in the Pacific, where the entire country is going to disappear. And I'm not sure what to do. I mean, it's just a horrible situation. So, but the one thing is, in terms of climate mitigation, Nigeria, again, can only rely on itself, because I don't think any investment help is coming. And then in the general issue of, help for Nigeria as a sovereign country, I mean, my own view is there may be some advice or some, small groups of advisors, and particularly the United States can lend a hand in terrorist issues, anti-terrorist issues. But, no one is going to be putting groups on the ground in Africa. Only Africans can do that.
Indeed. Okay, let me pick up another. Oh, okay.
In terms of the last question, just the last question about global leaders. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with, global organizations calling out leaders, whether they're in Nigeria or elsewhere, in terms of corruption. I mean, we have a country like Venezuela where other countries have made clear that they don't view it as legitimate on that. But, the majority of the push for change is going to come internally. And, I just going to highlight, Madame Obi's organization, for example, is the type of thing that's Nigerian organization, SPPG, that's really going to change things. Again, only Nigerians can change Nigeria at a fundamental level.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pick up more calls. Hello.
Evening, Elsie.
Evening, Emmanuel. One question, very quickly.
Number one question. Your guest said something. Trump said something about him being a unifier. But some of the things he plans to do are contradictory, to being a unifier. Like annexing Panama, Canada one, the Panama issue, the canal. They say they spend a lot of money on. That. What does your guest think about him being a unifier, with the conflicting actions that he seems to be taking or going to take in the near future if what he said is true?
Thank you, Emmanuel. No, you can only get one. I'm sorry. Right. Borderlines. No time, people. No time at all. Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. God bless you.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, please. My name is Pastor Emeka. There is something your guest said about Africa and Nigeria that we can fix our problem. I don't have any question this afternoon, but all I have to say is that I stand by what that particular information. You look at Darfur, you look at Sudan, you look at all the problems in Africa and in Nigeria insecurity. Please and please, whatever Africa can do to get out of this quagmire, please, very, very important. We are losing life so much. Please, thank you so much. I appreciate your program.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Hello.
Good afternoon, Cecilia.
Good afternoon.
This is Obolia.
Go ahead, please, quickly.
Yes, ma'am. I want to say thank you to your guest, because for someone like him who believes so much in this country, right now I really wish you were even the president, because even those who are leading us can't be as optimistic as he is right now. Donald Trump came inside and everybody in Nigeria or Africa will just rejoice. And I'm asking myself, I'm appalled. So my question this afternoon is, if he were to see the president one-on-one, what would he tell him? I love his views.
Sorry, what would he tell our president if he saw him one-on-one? Yes, okay, good question. Thank you very much. Thank you. Andrew, can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. This is good. Did you hear that?
I can hear you.
That particular last question, because we've literally got 7 minutes left. If you were to sit with President Bola Tinubu, what would you tell him right now?
Well, I think I have been clear, certainly at the early part of this administration. I was encouraged that he was going to do the right thing. I've been very clear in recent interviews. If I take one big issue for me, the lack of transparency at the NNPC. So when I was in country, I used to advocate for privatization of the NNPC or partial listing of the NNPC. People have come to that viewpoint, but we haven't seen the transparency. And I think that's really indication that this administration is not doing the things that we need to do for Nigerians. You have the most valuable financial asset of Nigeria, and there's no transparency of where those funds are going. A real disappointment too. Not sure if I was one-on-one with His Excellency the President. I have the courage to say that directly, but that to me is a real sign of an issue.
Okay. The other questions then.
On the question about Trump as a unifier, no, I don't view Trump as a unifier. He's executing his agendas I discussed earlier in the program. But, there are many Americans, and of course I'm not American, but there are many Americans who feel he's not their president.
Yeah.
He's, chosen to exclude the LGBT community, for example. It's clear that, women's rights are under assault here. What he said about the Los Angeles wildfires is appalling. You have this terrible tragedy. So we'll see how this unfolds. The one thing that people need to realize about the United States is its power is highly distributed. There's the court system, the Constitution, different states have different. So it's not a foregone conclusion. Well, it is a foregone conclusion. Not everything he wants to happen will happen. And we'll continue to have deep political divisions here. On the issue about, the future for Nigeria, I just wanted to add one thing. Is I think that sometimes people forget how long things take to happen. And so you were asking how long I was in Nigeria. So I came at first in 2008. And I lived full-time from 2012 to 2023, so 11 years. And the amount of change is incredible. And there's so many positive things happening. We actually wrote the book. There were 6 authors of it, including Rufai Oseni on it, because we wanted to tell those positive stories. So all of the problems that your listeners and every Nigerian are known, that they highlight are known. But, as I said, there's so many positive
I'm
things
being
that people
chased
trying
off
to make
that
a
we've
real
run out of
difference at every
time.
level.
Oh, gosh. Can you imagine? 1 hour goes so fast. Andrew, I need you back. Will you come back?
Of course I'll come back. And Nigeria I lived longer in Nigeria than anywhere else in my adult life. So,
But come back to Borderlines because it's the best show on foreign affairs in Nigeria, especially on radio.
I know that.
Thank you. Dr. Andrew Nevin, who has talked to us about brain food, multitasking, Trump, Davos, Africa, and how Nigeria can do better. Where else would you get that except for Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders? Andrew, thank you so very, very much. Very much. You'll be back very, very soon. My producer is going to fix
a real
a time
honor
with
for
you.
me.
The honor was ours.
What holds you back when you wake up each morning? Is it the uncertainty of how the day will unfold? And as the day goes on, what makes your heart race? Is it the quiet fear that maybe you're not doing enough? And when it's evening, is it the longing for just a little more?
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.